In relationships, like anything in life, everything is great until it isn't. And when we have disagreements with our husbands and our wives, we get the urge to act. We get the urge to fix, to do something, even if that action is to run away and hide. But what if the solution was not doing anything at all? What if the solution is just being there, being present, being aware? What if you know this, but your husband or wife doesn't? And what if you're like me, who thinks there's no way that something like that can work? Hey everyone, it's Kit, and this is the Relationship Algorithm. So I want to start by thanking everyone who's listening for tuning in. This is episode 1 of the Relationship Algorithm, and I've got to admit, I'm a little bit nervous to get started, but I'm also really, really excited. And part of me says, well, who am I to have this kind of talk? Who am I? Why should you listen to me? I'm a computer programmer by trade. I like syntax and rules. I need things to make logical sense. I reject things outright that I can't measure or observe. But when it comes to feelings, when it comes to sitting with myself and my own doubts and fears and discomforts, I was always just fine. And now I know fine as an acronym. Feelings I'm not expressing. And the idea of sitting absolutely still and doing nothing but sitting with my feelings, maybe they're feelings of depression, anxiety. I will do anything to avoid sitting still there, sitting with that. My wife, on the other hand, she's a couples therapist. Feelings are front and center for her every day. So you can imagine what our dinner table was like. But we got to a point in our relationship, in our marriage, and we have 2 children, and the days go by really fast, and everyone's busy, and you never have time to do anything except for the things that are on fire. And it's a very reactive way of living, and most parents can relate to that messiness of a day-to-day grind. And we get to a point where we are shortchanging ourselves, my wife and I, and we are not able to give the time and the dedication to ourselves and the presence to each other that we were previously in our relationship when we didn't have all of the distractions and life going on, and we were in more of a courting phase. So we actually thought about trying to impress the other person, trying to go out of our way to hear what they were saying or how they were feeling or anticipate what they would be going through, and trying to be that really supportive partner to win them over. And now, 6 years along, 10 years along, you're sitting there and your daughter doesn't want to put her shoes on to get out the door to get to that school bus that's coming in 3 minutes, even though you've told her 7 times already. And you don't have it in the back of your mind that says, hey, I forgot that my wife has like 6 clients later on today and she's been really stressed out, and I needed to give her that space and attention too. And these are the little things that kind of add up over time. So as our relationship went up, down, and sideways over the years, long story short, my wife and I have started a venture together to combine our expertise and bring all of this incredibly important and useful information about relationships and how to maintain them to the masses. And we want to bring this information to the people who need it the most. Not the folks whose relationships are teetering on the brink or about to fall apart, but those of us among us who are just getting started in life and in relationships and who don't necessarily have the time to think about all of the stuff they need to do in order to, at a long-term perspective, maintain and thrive. We want to use our own journey as a guidepost. And so all of the wins and mess ups that we've experienced, we can now catalog and organize and use as examples to demonstrate what you can do, what can be accomplished, and show everyone who's in a relationship what that reward looks like down the road and why it's a no-brainer to go after it. No one expects to buy a car and just drive it forever and never have to do any work on it. If you don't wash the car, if you don't fill it up with gas, if you don't get the oil changed, if you don't rotate the tires, all of these things will take that car that's brand new and over a period of months or years, run it into the ground. On the other hand, if you take care of that car, if you are very diligent about its upkeep and its maintenance, well, you can take a car that's crafted well and make it last for decades. Relationships are no different. We all know that you have to get the oil changed after 5,000 miles or so. But what we don't know is how many days can you go without having a real conversation with your partner before it starts to eat away at the fabric of your relationship and starts to have deleterious effects on your connection. The conclusion is simple. Whether you realize you're doing it or not, in order to be in a relationship, a long-term relationship that lasts, where connection really thrives, you have to work at maintaining it. It's no different than your need to brush your teeth every day to prevent cavities. Now, many people do this work without consciously thinking about what it is that they're doing, and they do it well, and it comes naturally to them and their partners. But I kind of call those couples unicorns because they are few and far between. Lots of other couples, myself and my wife among them, believe that we were doing the maintenance, that we were doing the work, even though we weren't really. So to go back to the car analogy, I was washing that car. I was putting a wax on it and keeping it shiny on the outside, and it looked great. But I never put gas in it. And we kept driving, and eventually we started running out of gas. And I was like, oh man, we're out of gas. We can't go anywhere. What if I just keep washing the car? Won't that fix what we need to do? And now I can keep driving it. And I would keep washing the car, and I would keep washing the car, and we couldn't go anywhere. And I would get frustrated because like, hey, I'm doing this work, but it's not solving my problem. Well, it's a silly kind of analogy, but that's what I was doing essentially by saying, hey, if we just have a logical, strategic plan about how to optimize our days and our nights so that our kids can be taken care of and we still have time to watch our movies and our TV shows together, and I can just get lunches packed just so every morning, and that'll give us 15 minutes to eat breakfast together real quick. I could do that all day long, and I could come up with the best, most efficient, award-winning scheduling plan. But that still wouldn't touch deeply to the core, the true connection between us. And as long as you ignore that, you can do whatever else in the world. And over time, you'll still, quote unquote, grow apart. And that's really sad to happen for some people who are, for all other intents and purposes, really good people and really love each other, but find themselves missing each other because they don't know how. So the conclusion is simple. You have to work on your relationship. You have to work on your connection. You have to get intentional about it. And you have to do it in a way that's not surface level. You have to set an intention of going deep, of slowing down, and showing up. before we can start to come up with exercises and game plans and practice for what to do in this type of work, there's 3 considerations we should make. And these are all very near and dear to me because if I could have explained these all to my wife ahead of the work that we've done, I think it would have saved me a lot of grief as the lesser emotionally intelligent of the two of us. And so consideration number 1, realize that for some people, staring down our emotions, our feelings, straight in the eye is tantamount to an existential crisis. And I'm not understating that. A real crisis, one that we might not even realize is there, but one we can't go near with a 10-foot pole because it's so scary. The analogy I like to use for this is you wouldn't expect somebody who's super skinny, super frail, super weak to go into a gym and load up a bar with 400 pounds of weights and just lift it up off the ground like it's no big deal. It makes no sense. How would somebody who hasn't developed the muscles be able to lift a big heavy weight? Well, if you think of your emotions as a weight, in this case, and your muscles as your ability to process, feel, be present without shrinking away, then it makes sense that for us guys and girls too, I don't want to be sexist, who don't typically acknowledge our feelings, well, then those muscles, those emotional muscles are atrophied away to nothing. So to look at us and say, hey, just do this really deep emotional work right off the bat is really an impossible task. And it's a frightening impossible task. And so just throwing somebody into the ocean without a life raft and they don't know how to swim, you're going to have a bad time. Consideration number 2, there's never going to be a good time until it's too late. Remember, we are living these busy lives where the day-to-day grind, the whirlwind, is always present. The stuff that gets our attention, that takes our focus, is the stuff that's already on fire. And your relationship is not. Your relationship is good. It's fine, right? There's nothing looking you in the eye saying, uh-oh, if I don't get my act together today, then tomorrow she might leave, or tomorrow we might not like each other anymore. It's just not like that. Everything is good. So you're not necessarily worried about keeping it good. This goes back to the car analogy and the teeth brushing analogy, where just because it's good doesn't mean you stop doing the maintenance work. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time was yesterday or today. And the best time to develop a high emotional intelligence was when you were a young child. And the next best time is now. And talking about the solution to finding the time is in and of itself an entire podcast episode. So let's just leave it at, if you're already here listening to this, then you're already on the right track of making the time. And that is wonderful. The third consideration, just because you get to a point where you have the emotional awareness and presence with your partner and you're maintaining that connection doesn't mean everything will go smoothly from here on out. It doesn't mean you're never going to fight. This is really important to understand and appreciate because from my perspective going into therapy, that's what I thought the goal was, that we'd hash out our arguments. The therapist would, like a boxing match, kind of raise the hand of the person who won the argument and explain it to the other person. You'd fix all of those issues. You collect your notes and you'd go off on your way and you wouldn't have those problems anymore. You can imagine that does not accurately reflect what kind of work you do in therapy. And it also doesn't reflect the kind of mindset that you need to have about maintaining a relationship rather than winning the present and never having to worry about it again. So just because we can get good at connecting and we can get good at slowing down and being there for one another doesn't mean it's not still going to be bumpy, that life's not going to still throw you curveballs. It's just what this is going to do is when those ruptures, those disconnects do happen, you're going to have the tools, you're going to have the strength to dig deep and be there for yourself and for your partner. The great news is that there is a formula that works. There are exercises you can do to build this emotional intelligence. There are things you can do by yourself and with your partner to foster this connection that will last a lifetime. So one thing I'm going to really try and emphasize here on this podcast is giving you concrete examples and exercises that you can take with you and use. Babies don't learn to talk by reading a book. They practice it, and they're not really good at it. They don't have the teeth, and then eventually they keep practicing and they keep trying to make words and sounds, and then all of a sudden they get it and they love it and they can't stop doing it. And so I want to give things you can do to start building that muscle, that strength, that repetition of what you need to do with yourself and together in order to harness this power of your connection. So the first exercise I'm going to give you two exercises today. And the first one I'm going to give you is for you to do with yourself. And this exercise is very simple. It's locate the feeling. So phase one of this exercise is to do this in the calm space by yourself in an environment where there's no distractions. You simply sit still and you think about how you're feeling in that moment. And once you can kind of hone in on a feeling, you say, where am I feeling that in my body? I'll give you an example. That's a really easy one. Let's say I'm feeling hungry. Well, I'm feeling hungry. I know it because my stomach is growling and churning in on itself. I feel it in my gut. I know I'm hungry. A much more complex and nuanced feeling might be one of sadness. Maybe it's a constriction in my throat. Maybe it's a heaviness in my chest. It's really hard to get that one. But if you practice locating your feeling, it's going to come in handy later. So phase two of this same exercise is you've practiced, it takes a minute each time to try and locate a feeling in your body. Now you've done it 10 different times and you're having a conversation with your husband and he says something that sets you off. Great. This is an opportunity to do phase two here. And this doesn't involve him. This is just now you locate the feeling again, but you're doing it on the battlefield this time. You're doing it in the heat of the moment. You want to say, okay, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm ashamed, I'm any number of things might come up. Okay, where is that now? And I don't want you to take this and do anything or tell anybody they need to fix it. I just want you to practice this ability to, in a safe environment, in a safe space, locate the feeling. And then as you can do that more easily, do it in real time in the heat of the moment. And what you'll find is the ability to notice what's going on in your body is going to be priceless in the later stages and exercises of how we navigate arguments and disconnections and tough times with each other. There's a lot to talk about on feelings, and I can't fit it all into one podcast. So we're just going to kind of have to take the Mr. Miyagi approach for now. Wax on, wax off. Paint the fence. So take those two phases and try it out. Sit in a calm, quiet spot and figure out what am I feeling and where am I feeling it. And then do the same thing in the heat of the moment with your spouse. So that about does it for this podcast. There's so much there to go deeper into, but I don't want to talk everyone into the ground to start off. I want to take manageable steps to get this off the ground, because once it gets going, there's so much momentum behind it that it can just change lives. And that's what I want everyone here to be able to get to experience the way I've experienced it and I continue to experience it. And make no mistake, it's not all sunshine and daisies in marriage. And if I were in the Olympics for emotional intelligence, I wouldn't make it out of the regional qualifiers, let alone make it to the podium, right? I am, on the grand scale of things, still very green in the land of emotional regulation and processing and handling myself. But I'm enough and more for my marriage, and that makes all the difference. I hope you enjoyed tuning in. There's a lot more to come. In the following weeks, we're going to be diving into some really fun topics. I will also hopefully get to bring in a few special guests for some interviews so that it's not just me talking the whole time. And as always, I'm going to try and keep giving lots of good practices and exercises so that you can follow along and build that emotional muscle along with us. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.